You ever have one of those perfect Sunday mornings where everything just feels still? That was me, laying in my brand new backyard hammock, mug of coffee in hand, finally enjoying the breeze after 3 straight weeks of double shifts at the hospital. I'm a respiratory therapist, so yeah, I earned that rest. Or so I thought. My name's Aaron Jacobs. I bought this house last year to get some peace and raise my daughter, Kaylee, somewhere quiet. I didn't know the real battlefield here wasn't the job, it was the HOA. And leading the charge was Deborah Whitmore, the HOA vice president and self-appointed neighborhood enforcer. Think sharp bob haircut, high heels on lawn inspections, and the type of woman who says, "I pay your salary," to a firefighter. That's Deborah. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard the voice. "Excuse me, sir," she barked from the sidewalk, standing rigid like she was inspecting a crime scene. "What do you think you're doing?" I raised my sunglasses. "Sitting. That hammock is not HOA approved. You need to take it down immediately." I sat up slightly, still laying back. "It's in my backyard. It's not attached to anything permanent, just 2 posts I installed on my property." She folded her arms. "It's a visual nuisance. I've already filed a complaint. If it's not gone within the hour, I'll escalate this." I pointed to the wooden fence between us. "You had to lean over a 6-foot fence just to see it. Who exactly is it bothering?" She didn't answer. She just stormed off with that stiff, angry walk that makes it look like the ground personally offended her. I figured that was the end of it. Silly me. 15 minutes later, I'm still in the hammock, Kaylee's reading on the patio, and I hear sirens, not a fire truck, a cop car. I stood up as the cruiser pulled up in front of my house and a young officer stepped out. Deborah was already waiting, arms flailing like a car lot inflatable. "There he is," she said, pointing dramatically through the gate. "He has a weapon strung between 2 poles." I felt threatened. He yelled at me. I feared for my life. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you said there was a weapon." "Yes, he had some kind of slingshot thing strung up like a trap. I want him arrested." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's a hammock," I replied calmly. "You know, for relaxing. My daughter's right there reading a book. You think I'm setting backyard traps?" The officer walked past her into my yard and looked at the hammock. He even sat on it. "This is a hammock," he said flatly. Deborah's face turned red. He screamed at me. "He was aggressive," Kaylee piped up from the patio. "No, he wasn't. I was right here. He didn't even raise his voice." The officer took out his notepad and turned to Deborah. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to explain exactly why you said there was a weapon involved." Her mouth opened, then closed. I thought you falsely reported a threat. That's a crime," she blinked. "Excuse me. I'm charging you with filing a false police report. You wasted our time and resources. You're lucky this didn't escalate." Her voice went up an octave. "I'm the vice president of the HOA. Then you should know better," he replied, already taking out his ticket pad. As he wrote her up, she stood there, shaking with rage. I leaned against the post and took a sip of my coffee. "Want to try the hammock?" I asked him. He grinned. "Nah, but I might get one for myself." Deborah stormed off again, but this time she didn't look so high and mighty, and that was just the beginning. By Tuesday evening, the neighborhood group chat was simmering. After word of Deborah's false report spread thanks to Officer Talbot's very public write-up, people started tiptoeing around her like she had a contagious rash of embarrassment. But not Deborah. She doubled down. I got home after an exhausting 12-hour shift, kicked off my shoes, and found a folded notice taped to my front door with surgical precision. I unfolded it and scanned the blocky font. Notice of violation. Unauthorized landscaping structures. Penalty pending review. Compliance hearing scheduled. She'd filed a formal violation over the hammock. Again, I didn't even bother stepping inside. I walked straight across the street to the community clubhouse where the HOA board held their weekly meetings and pushed open the door. The stale smell of coffee and printer toner hit me first. Then I saw them. Deborah perched at the end of the table like a gargoyle, flanked by 3 other board members. They all froze when I entered. "I just got your notice," I said. "You're scheduling a compliance hearing over 2 posts and a cloth swing." Deborah's jaw tightened. "You're welcome to present your case at the hearing." "Right, the hearing you scheduled without speaking to me first." One of the other board members, a wiry guy in a wool vest, I think, shifted in his chair. It's standard procedure. Once a complaint is filed, a hearing is automatically scheduled, even if the police already cleared it, I asked. Mark looked at Deborah, hesitated, then lowered his eyes. We hadn't considered that part. Deborah cleared her throat, loud and sharp. This isn't about police involvement. It's about preserving neighborhood standards. That hammock is visible from the cul-de-sac. No, it's not, I said. Unless someone's leaning over my fence again. She narrowed her eyes. Don't get combative. You filed a false report. That's not combative, it's dangerous, Mr. Jacobs, she said, her voice growing syrupy and fake. You're welcome to contest the violation at the hearing. Until then, any further comments should be submitted in writing. I let out a low laugh. You know what, fine. I left without another word, but I wasn't done. I knew how to fight this properly. I wasn't just going to show up to their kangaroo court. I was going to bring the law with me. The next morning, I called an old friend, Rachel Lynn, who I hadn't seen since college. She'd worked her way up through city government and now had a desk at the Zoning and Code Compliance Office. After I filled her in, she didn't hesitate. She filed a violation over a structure that isn't permanent and isn't visible from public property, she asked. Exactly. I can draft you a variance letter, she said. It won't just shut them down, it'll make it clear they're overstepping. Want me to include the officer's citation against her? Please do. By Friday, I had a signed letter from the city officially stating that my hammock did not fall under any zoning restrictions or community easement limitations. It even cited the property lines, which I'd had surveyed before the install. I made 5 copies and stapled one to the HOA clubhouse door. The following Monday, I walked into the compliance hearing with my daughter in tow. She insisted on coming, said she wanted to watch the neighborhood soap opera unfold live. The room was packed. Apparently, word had gotten around. Deborah looked ready to burst when she saw the letter in my hand. You can't post things on the clubhouse without authorization, she snapped. Then take it down, I said, handing copies to everyone at the table. Mark squinted at it. This is from the city zoning office. Rachel had even stamped it with a raised seal just to be thorough. Deborah tried to pivot. This doesn't address the aesthetic impact. The HOA bylaws allow us to regulate visible structures that disrupt neighborhood symmetry. Another board member, a woman named Lorraine, leaned forward. But it says here it's not visible unless someone's in his yard. That would mean someone's entering private property to lodge complaints. I caught Deborah's eye. You didn't mention that part when you filed the report, did you? She said nothing. Mr. Jacobs, Lorraine continued, this violation is being dismissed. And I'd like to suggest we establish a clearer process for complaint verification before scheduling hearings. Deborah slammed her pen down. You're setting a precedent. If we let him ignore the rules, everyone will. Mark looked at her calmly. We're not ignoring the rules. We're following the law. The room didn't exactly erupt in applause, but there were more than a few nods and murmurs of agreement. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next week, I came home to find the screws on one of my hammock posts had been stripped. Not loosened, stripped, like someone had tried to remove them in a hurry, failed, and gave up. My daughter noticed it first when she leaned against the post and it shifted slightly. I called Officer Talbot again. I didn't make accusations, I just asked for a vandalism report and requested a patrol car roll through the neighborhood more frequently. He agreed and said he'd file the report with the city. The following evening, Kaylee and I installed a set of discrete motion-activated cameras to cover the yard, one on the patio light, another tucked beneath the eaves. 2 nights later, the cameras caught everything. At 2:13 in the morning, someone crept into our yard from the side gate, unlocked at the time, and made their way straight to the hammock post. They wore a hoodie and gloves, but the streetlight caught a clean profile shot as they turned to look around. It was Deborah. I brought the footage straight to Officer Talbot and gave him the full timeline. He watched it twice, then let out a long breath and nodded. This crosses into criminal trespass and attempted destruction of property, he said. And since she's already been warned, we're looking at misdemeanor charges, possibly more depending on how the prosecutor wants to handle it. He filed the report, and within a day, Deborah was served with a notice of criminal charges. The neighborhood grapevine went from simmer to full boil. I didn't hear from her directly after that, but I noticed she stopped attending the HOA meetings in person. A week later, a folded flyer appeared in every mailbox announcing a special election to reassess HOA leadership structure. Lorraine stopped by while I was working in the garage. "Not a coincidence," she said, nodding toward the flyer. "People saw the video. Mark and I want to nominate new leadership. You in?" I wiped my hands on a rag. "You want me to run?" "No, we want you to help rewrite the bylaws. You've got a spine." "And proof." I looked at the flyer again and smiled. "Let's do it." Because if Deborah wanted to play games, she picked the wrong yard. Deborah's resignation came in the form of a terse, one-sentence email to the HOA mailing list. No apology, no explanation. Just a formal step down, with the subject line in all caps: personal reasons. The special election went forward anyway. By the time Lorraine and Mark restructured the board's leadership, most of the neighborhood had turned a cold shoulder to the old regime. Yard signs popped up overnight, not political ones, but homemade posters reading things like "Our property, our rules," and "Sunshine looks better without shade." Someone even strung a hammock between two trees in the parkway just to make a point, but Deborah wasn't done. 2 weeks after the charges were filed, a plain white van rolled through the neighborhood just after sundown. It parked for less than 10 minutes outside my house, engine running the entire time. I wouldn't have noticed if Kaylee hadn't pointed out that someone was taking flash photos of our backyard through the slats in the fence. I was already halfway down the walkway by the time the van peeled off. I caught a partial plate and immediately called it in. Officer Talbot requested the neighborhood surveillance camera footage from nearby doorbells, and by morning, we had a match. The van was traced to a private investigations firm based 2 towns over. A subpoena pulled the contract record. The client was listed under Whitmore Properties, LLC. I hadn't known about the LLC. Turns out, Deborah had quietly formed the company during her tenure on the HOA board. The entity had been buying up distressed properties in nearby neighborhoods, flipping them, and lobbying to annex adjacent streets into HOA jurisdiction to drive up value. She'd been laying groundwork for a full consolidation and using her position to muscle homeowners into compliance or out of the area altogether. The more we dug, the worse it got. Mark's brother, a municipal attorney, pulled records from the county clerk's office. Deborah had filed no less than 4 petitions to expand the HOA's boundaries over the past year. Each one included affidavits of unanimous neighborhood support, complete fabrications. The signatures were questionable too. Some were from homeowners who'd moved out as far back as 2 years ago. One belonged to a man who'd passed away in 2019. Lorraine brought the findings to the county prosecutor. Within days, an investigation was opened. The charges escalated from misdemeanor trespassing to felony fraud. We were told to keep quiet while they built the case, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, things got personal. My mailbox was smashed in with a brick. Kaylee's bike tires were slashed while locked up at the park. Someone even dumped a bag of nails across my driveway one morning. But the moment I installed an additional camera overlooking the front yard, it all stopped, because the law was closing in and Deborah knew it. A month later, early on a Thursday morning, federal agents showed up in black SUVs. They executed a search warrant on her home and seized 3 desktop computers, a stack of HOA meeting records, and a filing cabinet marked private in red tape. The neighbors stood on their lawns in robes and slippers, absolutely silent. The next day, the prosecutor's office filed formal charges: wire fraud, falsifying legal documents, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. She'd been using her HOA position to funnel influence into her LLC's property acquisitions and recruiting other board members to push expansion votes under pressure. But here's where it really unraveled. Deborah hadn't acted alone. One of the former board members, a guy named Elliot, was caught altering meeting minutes to reflect votes that never happened. In exchange for immunity, he handed over emails and voice recordings. One of them included Deborah bragging about cleaning the neighborhood up one hammock at a time. She laughed in it, loud. That recording was played during her arraignment. I was subpoenaed to testify not just about the false police report, but about the pattern of harassment and surveillance that followed. Kaylee gave a statement too, through a child victim advocate. She talked about how she didn't feel safe riding her bike anymore. How she jumped every time a white van passed. The court took that seriously. By the time Deborah's lawyer tried to paint her as a misunderstood community advocate, the judge had already reviewed the surveillance footage, the forged petitions, and the LLC contracts linking her to illegal property deals. The courtroom was packed with neighbors watching like it was a live show. No one clapped, but no one looked away. She was denied bail. The new HOA board, under Lorraine's leadership, held a public forum the following week. Instead of folding under the weight of scandal, the community came together. They voted to dissolve several of the older bylaws, stripping the board's power down to basic maintenance and budget management. No more anonymous fines, no more hidden votes. Every action would now require a public record and homeowner approval. They even passed a new amendment called the Property Privacy Clause, making it illegal for any HOA official to surveil, photograph, or record a residence without the owner's permission. It passed unanimously. I didn't run for office. I didn't need to. My fight was never about power, it was about peace. And finally, after months of retaliation, legal battles, and early morning police calls, the hammock stayed up, untouched. Kaylee and I still sit out there on weekends when I'm not on shift. We just listen to the wind and the birds, and once in a while, the distant sound of construction on one of Deborah's now liquidated properties. Funny thing about people like her, they think power is something you force on others. But real strength, it's in knowing where your line is and refusing to let anyone cross it. Even if they come wearing heels and a clipboard. The fallout hit faster than anyone expected. After the charges stuck and the HOA board was turned over, you'd think things would settle. But the deeper legal investigations unearthed something Lorraine, and I hadn't anticipated something that made everything else look like a warm-up. It started when the county planning office flagged several discrepancies in the HOA's financial filings. Lorraine had been going over the old annual budgets to prepare for the next community vote on dues when she noticed something strange. A quarterly maintenance payment listed as emergency sidewalk repairs, charged to a non-existent contractor. $28,000 had been paid out over 2 years, every 3 months, to a company called East Valley Infrastructure Solutions. Problem was, that company didn't exist. Not in the state, not in the business registry, not even in the IRS database. Lorraine brought it to me and Mark that evening. I cross-checked every name on the invoices, she said, laying out the papers on my kitchen table. The signatures are all the same, and guess who authorized the payments? Mark studied the documents. Deborah, of course, but it gets worse. Look at this. She pulled out a bank statement, obtained through the county's subpoena during the racketeering investigation. The money from HOA dues had been transferred to a subsidiary account under Whitmore Consulting Group, the same account Deborah had used to fund her LLC's property purchases. I thought all her fraud was tied to the annexation petitions, I said. So did the prosecutor. But this is embezzlement. Over $112,000 had been siphoned from the HOA reserves under fake project names. Landscaping upgrades, road repairs, even community wellness initiatives that no one had ever heard of. The worst part, some of the forged invoices bore the names of actual local contractors, people who had no idea their businesses were being used as cover. The prosecutor's office was notified immediately, and within 48 hours, the charges against Deborah were amended to include felony embezzlement, forgery, and identity fraud. The HOA's insurance carrier froze the board's financial accounts pending a civil audit. Deborah's personal and business assets were seized under a court order, but the legal storm didn't stop with her. Elliot, the board member who had cut a deal earlier, was dragged back into court for withholding documents. He'd forgotten to mention that he'd approved the disbursement checks while serving as treasurer. His immunity agreement was revoked. He ended up in county jail without bail after investigators found evidence he'd used HOA funds to pay off personal credit card debt and make a down payment on a convertible. It became clear that the HOA had functioned more like a shell company for Deborah's ambitions. Every complaint, every violation, every fine, they were all part of a system designed to create conflict, drive out dissenters, and flip properties under her LLC's name, and it had gone unnoticed for years. I testified again, this time as a witness to the patterns of coercion, retaliation, and financial misconduct. I submitted the emails I'd received from Deborah, complete with timestamps and metadata, showing how she attempted to push neighbors into violations. Lorraine presented the budget anomalies, and the court's forensic accountant confirmed what we'd all suspected. The HOA's budget had been weaponized. The judge overseeing the case, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Judge Callahan, delivered a scathing statement from the bench. She called it the most egregious abuse of community trust this court has seen outside of political office. Deborah was sentenced to 18 years without parole. Elliot got 6. The rest of the former board members accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony. But the real victory came after the sentencing, under state law. Because the HOA had been used to commit organized fraud, the court appointed a receiver, a third-party administrator, to manage its dissolution. The neighborhood voted to terminate the HOA entirely. The bylaws, the CC and Rs, the power structure, it all went up in flames, legally speaking. The receiver coordinated with the city to transition maintenance responsibilities to the local municipality. Streetlights, sidewalks, and snow removal were absorbed into the town's public works department. No more fines, no more secret meetings, just a neighborhood like any other, free to handle its affairs without bureaucracy breathing down its neck. On the last day of the receiver's oversight, Lorraine hosted a barbecue at the community park. No one wore name tags or held clipboards. People brought lawn chairs and casseroles. Families dragged out coolers. Someone even rented a bounce house. Mark grilled burgers while Kaylee and I set up a projector for a backyard movie night. "You ever think we'd get here?" Lorraine asked, handing me a lemonade. "Honestly, no," I said. "But I'm glad we did." She looked around at the kids playing tag, at the dogs chasing frisbees, at the neighbors who once tiptoed around their own front doors now laughing with their chairs pulled into haphazard circles. "All that over a hammock," she said. I shook my head. "No." That was just the spark. The fire was already waiting. Later that night, after the movie had ended and most folks had packed up, I walked back to my yard. The stars were out, the air was still, and the hammock was swaying gently in the breeze. Not a scratch on it since the cameras went up. Kaylee joined me a few minutes later with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Do you think she'll come back?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "And even if she tried, this place isn't the same anymore." We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the night. No sirens, no arguments, just peace. The kind you don't realize you've been missing until you finally get it back.